Hey guys, today we're gonna try creating a Python tutorial. So by the end of this, you'll be able to create some sort of pizzeria type game. So a customer order something, and then you'll be able to repeat the order and get a higher score. So I think that's what we're gonna try and make. So let's get to the basics. So the first thing we want to do is obviously print hello world. So basically what's happening here is we have this print, which is actually a built-in function that Python provides for you. And we're going to need these two parentheses to hold in the arguments of the function. And so these are what arguments look like. And one of these things is called a string. What is a string? A string is a collection of characters, so it's like a sentence, but you could also make it just one letter, and you can also add strings together to concatenate them. And strings can either use single quotes or double quotes. And then we have the numbers, and can either have whole numbers or floats. These are floats, which are decimals. These two are actually not the same. Internally, your computer stores integers and floats differently because floats take up more space because you have to also store the decimals afterwards, and so that's why they're different. And Python, it's not gonna care. It's gonna have them as two types for no reason. You're highly recommended to use integers if you don't care about decimals. And then we have booleans, true and false. And then we also have the none type, which is basically nothing. If you don't want to pass anything, you don't want to define anything. So that's very nice. There's a few other types. For example, arrays. Arrays are you see this? That's the argument thing that I was just talking about. You can store all the types as before. Only difference is this is an array, and so instead of passing it to an argument, if you print this, you won't see this. Instead, what you'll see instead is an array like that. I'm sorry, that wasn't probably a very good explanation, but they're really useful because you can, if they're all the same type, you could have an example, a set of numbers, like the grades of a student, and you could just append that, and you can append numbers to the array, and that's really useful because you wouldn't be able to store an arbitrary amount of data. And another cool thing is you can loop through them. Before we do that, we need to first talk about loops. So loops are there's two types of loops in Python. There's technically a third, but we won't talk about it yet. We have the for loop, and we also have the while loop. The while loop is basically while this statement is true. I need to indent in Python if you don't know already, but while true. And this pass statement is basically if you do it like this, Python will throw an error because Python needs to have code to know when to stop, because Python is white space based, and that's one of its limitations. So you can just do pass, it basically does nothing. And so now we just have a program that doesn't stop. But that's not nice. We could also make it so it just prints it forever. That's really useful for like, it isn't useful yet, you might think, but it is, because first we're going to define a variable, and while true, we could just print the variable, and then you can increment the variable. This is how you increment. You could also increment like this, but as you can see, that's really a lot of text, and you don't want to repeat yourself. As you can see, we now have a counting up function. Very useful. But now, another way is if you want to print it from like 1 to 10, that also is possible. So like we have to compare if a is less than 10. So now it goes from 0 to 9 because 10 is not less than 10, and yeah. Alright, now let's talk about the for loop. The for loop is to loop through, you can loop through like all sorts of objects, like arrays, and it's really different from like the while loop. So for example, we could have an array like this, and if you want to print all the items in the array, but you want to format it however you want, we could do for item in array. It kind of looks like English, kind of doesn't, and we can do print item, just like that. And look at that, we printed all the items in the array. And as you can see, you can format it how you want. That's very useful. Then another use for the for loop is actually to just loop through numbers. Like you saw how like for the while loop you had to like do something like this to loop from 0 to 4. But with a for loop, it's much easier to do for and it's okay because basically here it defines the variable, but it won't actually override this variable. For and use a new function called range from 0 to 5. Pretty sure it's exclusive. Right, and it's highly recommended you add space between the operator because it looks better that way. You don't have to. And as you can see, it's the same. These two are the same, but this is way easier to read, way easier to code, way easier to think about. Alright. And another thing with the range is you can also step. So the step function allows you to skip skip things. So let's look at the equivalent while version. That's it. That's all it does. 0 to 4, 0 to 4. So that's what those are. Alright. And the final thing we're going to talk about are dictionaries. So dictionaries. So we're going to define a dictionary. How about like that? And they're not really like dictionaries as in like definitions for words. Dictionaries are basically like if you have a string called like x, you could assign that a value 6. And what makes this super useful is like if you have a equals to 5, b equals to 6, c equals to 7, and you want the user to choose one of these variables, well, you have to use them. You actually have to like not to wait for the user to say A, B, or C. But the problem here is you have like an infinitely many, like, I don't know, D equals to 8, and you don't want to have to like add switch cases for all of these. You can just use a map for it instead, and then you can just do map input like that. So it's not a really good example, but it's just so here's our code using that, and so these are all comparisons between how the code's gonna work. So here's our map, and here's our set of variables. That's not the only use case, but this is just to demonstrate. And then we could just have like a user input, like user input equals to A. Now, if you want to get one of these, you have to use if statements, which look like this. Okay. So basically, it looks like the while loop if something and that. And as you may know, you can also use pass for that if you don't want to handle the case. And then we also do elif. This is just shorthand for else, and then if. Obviously, you shouldn't be doing that because, well, that's just bad. That's like a lot of code. And elif user input equals to b print b. As you can see, this is really repetitive and just very bad because you type a lot and you're repeating yourself, which makes it harder if you want to talk about it in the future or think about it. And then we have the else statement, which is if this isn't true, then run this. And that's how you would do it for a set of variables. As you can see, if you just add more, it actually manually handle the case. For the map, you just have to use, this looks like an array, but this actually isn't an array. It's called the indexing symbol, I believe. And you just add the key, for example, like print map A, but we're just going to put in the variable like that. And it's the same, but in much more code. Also, to get the input from the user, you can use the input function, the print function. Your letter, I guess. Now, the only problem with this is if I do a key that's not in it, like that, it's going to throw an error. So I have to catch the error. There's actually two ways to do it. This is the way Python wants you to do it. So you have to first try to catch, accept. Yeah, I need to use it, and then like that. So, what is the try accept? So first you have to, it's like the while loop. Well, it's more like the if and else. So first if, but without this, because try makes it so it executes all this code, right? And if any of these errors, instead of printing the error, it'll actually put the error right here, except I think it's I don't remember the name, but you can look for specific error types. For now, we don't really care, so try and then accept. Then you can just print not found, because we know for sure, because we know there's no other error possible. So we just know that the user inputted an invalid text, so we just print not found. Now, with that parity. So that's the map. The other way you can do it is like this. If user input in map, so this just checks if this key is in map, and you can do it just the same way. Python doesn't want you to do this because for more complex programs, maybe that the map is actually being used elsewhere in a different thread. So threads are like two programs running at once, and if you check for it here and the other thread actually like added a key, removed the key or something in the map, then this code will not be guaranteed to be correct and wouldn't give the result you want. So that's why they want you to use the error method, because no matter what, it'll always show an error if it's not existent. So yeah, those are all the types in Python. I hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, thank you.